The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I'm in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. I am feeling a little bit under the weather with this week, but that is not going to stop us from talking NFL Week 11. This is my flu game. I'm caffeinated. I've got Dayquil. Let's go.
Hey, you got all the meds in you. This is when the big dogs come out fighting through the flu. So we're pumped to have you here, Tan. But let's take a midseason recap on our 8 futures that we released from our preseason podcast. So let's start with the Colts under 8.5 wins.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like we're on pace here. It's Colts, by our numbers, are on pace for 7.2 wins. So certainly can't cash this one yet, but it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, that one definitely looks good. But we also had Rashawn Gary at 33-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. We had Jared Verse at Defensive Rookie of the Year at 9-1.
Yeah, the Gary one out of play. But Jared Verse, that's looking good. Grant, you can go ahead and put up the current odds on the screen. I like where we're at on the Jared Verse Defensive Rookie of the Year here.
Yeah, sitting in a good spot for that one. We also had Dave Canales, Coach of the Year at 15-1. We had Joey Bosa, sack leader, 88-1. And then we had Patriots under 330.5 points, which is looking pretty good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, New England's on pace for 272 points. And we'll talk about in the next segment why I don't think that scoring average is going up this week.
Yeah, and then we had 2 more here. So we had Commanders' lowest scoring team at 25-1. And then we had Joe Burrow plus 850 to lead the NFL in passing yards.
Yeah, that Commanders one is not looking good, but Burrow does sit at the top of the leaderboard in passing yards. Now, Geno Smith has a game in hand here, so I don't know that I would make Burrow a favorite or anything, but I kind of like where we're at there. So overall, we took 6 long shots in those 8 preseason pods, and 2 of them are in play, and we only need to hit 1 of them to be profitable on those long shots. Either Jared Verse wins Defensive Rookie of the Year or Joe Burrow leads the NFL in passing yards. And then on the 2 non-long shots, the Colts win total and the Patriots under 330 points, we are on pace. So I think we're doing pretty good on the futures that we gave out before the season as we check in here in the middle of the year.
Yeah, they're definitely looking good. But let's jump into our first segment here, which is the free bet of the week. And we are 13-5-1 with podcast sides and totals dating back to last year after Carolina won outright in Germany. But who are you going with this week, Tan?
Well, I mentioned this in the last segment, but I'm taking the Rams -5 over New England. And I just think New England's offensive line is going to fall apart on Sunday against this Rams front. Patriots left tackle Vidrian Lowe, right tackle DeMontre Jacobs ranked 54th and 60th respectively in pass blocking efficiency, and there's only 61 qualifying tackles. So we're talking about 2 of the worst 10 tackles in the NFL, and that pair is going to struggle mightily across from Los Angeles edge defenders Byron Young and Jared Verse. Young, 11th in pass rushing efficiency, and Verse, so we talked about earlier, has a 20% pressure rate as a rookie. That's 3rd in the entire league. And then, you talk about the tackles, that's a disaster matchup for the Patriots, but their interior offensive line has been even worse grading-wise than the tackles, and the Rams have 2 big bodies on the interior, Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner, who rank 5th and 7th, respectively, in pass rushing efficiency.
Yeah, that does not sound like a recipe for success for Drake May here, but are they really just going to lean on this ground game then?
I think Alex Van Pelt, Patriots offensive coordinator, would like to do that to protect his rookie quarterback with the ground game. They're 5th in run rate adjusted for situation when you take a look at down and distance and time left in the game. But it's not really working for them, right? Ramondre Stevenson has only 2 games this year when he's finished with a yards per carry above 4.0. So it's pretty bad for Ramondre this year. And Los Angeles is conceding only 4.3 yards per rush. That's 8th best in the NFL.
All right, well, shifting over to the Rams offense, can we expect a big game here from Stafford?
Well, I think so. It's kind of been a little bit of a weird year for Stafford because, well, first of all, the Rams had all those injuries on the offensive line and Cooper Kupp and Puka were out. And Stafford has a 50% off-target rate on throws into the end zone this year. That is shockingly high and certainly not something we would expect moving forward. The Rams were 8th in EPA per dropback last year in the red zone, and I think that Stafford is going to be scoring more touchdowns when he gets in close as the season progresses. And I think he's got a favorable matchup this week because Los Angeles is averaging 13% more yards per pass play against cover one than other coverages this season. And New England has the fourth highest cover one rate. So our model thinks that the Rams should be favored by a touchdown here as they head on the road to New England. And we're going to go ahead and take the Rams -5 as a best bet.
Yeah, I really like that pick, but let's shift it over to our next segment here. We've got stock up, stock down, and whose stock are you buying right now, Tan?
Well, the Bears fired Shane Waldron.
Thank God.
Shane Fraudron. Thomas Brown is going to take over as the offensive coordinator here. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to be buying the Bears stock, but not because of the play caller change. I'm buying the stock because Shane Waldron basically got fired because he has the worst pass blocking schemes in the NFL, and the Bears were without so many starters on the offensive line, and now they're getting left tackle Braxton Jones back. He went out after 18 snaps into week 8, and then they were without his backup, Karan Amaguje, and we talked about that on a couple of podcasts, how it was going to be a disaster for the Bears missing those guys. Darnell Wright went out the next week. They're starting right tackle, and the Bears have had a league-high 11 offensive linemen take 20 snaps this season.
Yeah, and to add to your point, in the last 3 weeks, the Commanders have had a 63% pressure rate, the Cardinals had a 42% pressure rate, and then the Patriots had a 39% pressure rate against this just abysmal offensive line.
Right. It looks like they're going to be getting Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright back. Tevin Jenkins, a little bit questionable, but when you're getting both starting tackles back, I think that it's going to look a lot better this week, right? I mean, the Packers haven't had a dominating pass rush like we might have thought they were going to coming into the year. And so I think Caleb Williams is going to have enough time, enough protection to find DJ Moore, who's certainly going to be featured more after all the complaining he's done under the new offensive coordinator. And he's going to be in a favorable matchup across from cornerback Eric Stokes, who ranks 63rd out of 74 qualifying cornerbacks in yards per cover snap allowed. And then, Thomas Brown was calling plays last year in Carolina, and that's kind of why I'm not super optimistic for him going forward. But in this game, we saw Thomas Brown have the 32nd pass rate versus expectation last year when he was the play caller. And it's like, okay, well, are the Bears just going to turn into a complete run-heavy team? I don't love the sound of that, but this game, I don't mind it because Green Bay has the worst run defense in the NFL by our metrics. So I think the Bears offense is going to look good this week because of the offensive linemen coming back and because they're going to be taking advantage of the Packers' defensive weakness. But then I wouldn't get out over my skis, in future weeks because I'm really not confident that it will be Thomas Brown when everyone's calling like, oh, look how he changed the Bears offense this week. It's more of just personnel and scheme.
Yeah, if I've learned one thing about the public, they are going to overreact if they look good this week. They're going to think that they are fully back. So don't get over your skis like Tanner said. But whose stock are you going to be selling this week?
Okay, I'm selling the Vikings offense stock. Okay. So we saw them have a little bit of a tough game last week, and I don't know that they're going to be getting back on track on Sunday. Justin Jefferson was the intended receiver on all 3 of Sam Darnold's interceptions in Jacksonville, and all 3 were against split safety coverage. The Titans have the 7th highest split safety, too high safety rate in the NFL, and that has been a good sign for Justin Jefferson. He has generated 29.1 EPA per play when targeted against 29.1 expected points added, not per play, against single high, but negative 7.8 EPA when targeted against too high. And I can expect the Titans are going to be playing a ton of too high this week against the Vikings.
Yeah, and Darnold's yards per pass play versus cover 4 is 83% of his yards per pass play against any other coverages, and Tennessee's defense runs the 3rd highest cover 4 rate, which is not going to help.
Right. So it feels like the Titans are going to be doing a lot of the stuff that the Jaguars did last week to put Darnold on the back foot. And so what the Vikings can do to try and counteract this is go to the tight end and TJ Hawkinson underneath. We saw his target share rise from 12% in week 9 to 24% in his second game as he integrates himself into this offense. And Minnesota, with Hawkinson out there, they're feeling a lot more comfortable putting more bigger bodies on the field. They had a 45% heavy personnel rate against the Jaguars, but taking the wide receivers off the field this week might not be the correct strategy, as the Titans defense ranks third in the NFL in terms of relative yards per pass play allowed to heavy personnel. And then the last thing I wanted to mention about a reason I'm selling the Vikings offense this week is the Titans' best player on defense, Jeffrey Simmons. He has 16 pressures in the last month. That's third in the NFL. Is going to be lined up across from the Vikings' worst player on the team, right guard Ed Ingram, who has surrendered the fifth most pressures among guards. So I kind of feel like Tennessee's defense is going to be able to shut down the Vikings offense on Sunday.
All right, well, let's shift it over to the injury watch. And the Dolphins will be without starting cornerback Kendall Fuller, who is going to be out due to a concussion.
Yeah, and that's good news for Gardner Minshew and the new offensive staff here for the Raiders. Scott Turner is going to be calling the plays this week. And, the Dolphins already had a below average pass defense, and now they're without a starting cornerback there. Miami backup cornerback Cam Smith is surrendering 1.09 more yards per cover snap than Fuller. And so he's going to struggle mightily when lined up across from Jacoby Myers. It's a huge drop-off. Cam Smith has been pretty bad this year, and Jacoby Myers has been solid, right? He's 11th in success rate. I certainly think the Dolphins will be trying to get Jalen Ramsey on Jacoby Myers, but the Raiders can do some creative things to get Myers on Cam Smith. So I expect Myers to have a pretty good game here in Miami.
All right, well, looking at the Dolphins' offense, their O-line is pretty banged up here.
It is. They're without right tackle Austin Jackson, and that's not what you want to be hearing against the Raiders, against Max Crosby. And so it's going to be backup Kendall Lamb there. The Dolphins are going to try and mitigate this problem by Tua getting the ball out really fast, like we've seen. But Crosby is one of the best in the NFL. He's third in batted passes this year. So I kind of feel like even if Tua is trying to get the ball out quickly, Crosby against a backup, he's just going to be batting all the passes and taking down every throw to Tua's right side. So I think Crosby is going to destroy this game on Tua's blind side here.
All right, well, looking at the Colts, their offense is in rough shape for the return of Anthony Richardson.
It is. And we bet this game. We bet the Jets before it was announced that Anthony Richardson would be starting. And I was kind of surprised to see. So when we bet it, we bet Jets minus 3.5, and the market moved on our release out to 4. And then when Anthony Richardson was named the starter, it moved back to 3.5, which I was surprised by. And now it's back to 4 again. But it's like, we know Joe Flacco is better than Anthony Richardson, and 2 subpar games against the Vikings and Bills don't necessitate an overreaction here. I mean, the Vikings are first in EPA per play allowed, and the Bills are 10th in EPA per play allowed. So, I mean, Joe Flacco had 2 bad games against 2 great defenses.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize that Flacco is averaging 0.13 EPA per play more than Richardson, even after those 2 bad games.
Right. So Flacco is clearly better than Richardson. And, we talked about when Richardson got benched initially, we didn't agree with the move because you want to develop the young guy, but certainly it helps the Jets bet here. And it's the main thesis behind the Jets bet before the quarterback was announced was that the Colts are going to be without 3 starting offensive linemen: center Ryan Kelly, right guard Will Freeze, and left tackle Bernard Raymond, who ranks 20th in pass blocking efficiency. That means we're going to have 3 rookies on the Indianapolis offensive line against this vaunted Jets defensive line. Will McDonald is 4th in sacks this year. Hassan Reddick has been great since he finally signed that contract. And of course, you've got Quinnen Williams on the interior. And then on the other side, the Jets offensive line is getting healthier. We saw right guard Elijah Vera Tucker and left guard John Simpson come back last week, and the Jets couldn't pick up those Cardinals blitzes, but they're not going to have to worry about all that creative blitzing. The Jets just got out-coached last week in terms of in the trenches, but that's not going to happen this week because the Colts run a pretty vanilla pass rush. They have the 4th highest standard pass rush in the NFL.
All right, well, not a good spot for A-Rich, but let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the DraftKings Player of the Slate, and who are you putting in your lineup?
I'm going to go with Nick Chubb at $6,000. I think this is the week we finally see the breakout game from Nick Chubb, who's averaging 2.7 yards per rush this year. That is truly awful, but I think he's going to be getting closer to his career 5.2 yards per carry this week against a New Orleans defense that ranks 31st in EPA per rush allowed, and they could be without starting linebacker Pete Werner. So I think we're going to get a healthy dose of Nick Chubb this week, and he should be able to find the end zone at least once, maybe twice.
Ooh, okay. Well, let's shift it over to our next segment here, and we've got the weather of the week. And what are you seeing out there?
Well, there really isn't much weather of concern this week. I was going through all the games and like, there's not much to bring up here. We typically see scoring drop by about a half point in the second half of seasons, but I would think this week is going to be higher on the higher scoring side compared to other weeks, except in those divisional games. Those games tend to play lower in the second half of years.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment here. And instead of a primetime game, we want to talk about the Baltimore versus Pittsburgh game. And we've got 2 7-win teams going at it in division. So this should be a fun one.
Yes, yes. And Lamar Jackson, last week, he had 250 yards from a clean pocket. Baltimore's offense is just humming. They've destroyed the Bengals in both the games they've played. And Jackson's 103 expected points added since week 5, since that first Bengals game, is the second most in a 6-game span since 2015. So he is having, this is the best stretch of his career. But Mike Tomlin's defense might be able to contain Jackson. I think Baltimore is, the things they like to do on offense. The Steelers have some good counters to that, starting with Baltimore's offense targets the tight ends the 5th most in the NFL, and Pittsburgh's defense ranks 5th in EPA per target allowed to tight ends.
Well, the Ravens' run game has been incredible this year, but are the Steelers going to have an answer for that?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're 4th in success rate, but I don't know that they're going to be able to run the ball easy with Derrick Henry because the Steelers are 5th in EPA per rush allowed. So those are the two main things that the Ravens do, right? Throw to the tight ends and run the football. And the Steelers, top 5 in both, defending those two things.
Well, every Steelers game begs the question of who is going to slow down or try to slow down TJ Watt. But do they have an answer here?
They do not. That's another thing. It's another check in the Steelers department because the Ravens, probably their worst player on offense is rookie right tackle Roger Rosengarten. He ranks 3rd worst in pass blocking efficiency, and he's going to be lined up against TJ Watt. So they're going to basically have to chip Watt on every play. They cannot let Rosengarten go one-on-one with Watt. Now, the Ravens do catch a break because Steelers edge defender Alex Highsmith is going to be out here, and he ranks 13th in pass rushing efficiency. But the Steelers did make a trade for edge defender Preston Smith at the trade deadline for depth, so I think he's going to get a lot of snaps on Sunday.
All right, so if this isn't matching up well for the tight ends or the run game, does that mean this can be a big game for the receivers?
Well, Baltimore has beat cover 3, which is what the Steelers do. The Steelers play the 2nd most cover 3 in the NFL, and Baltimore is averaging 26 more yards per pass play against cover 3 than other coverages. So I think they can find success there. We talked about how it's probably not going to be the tight end. So I think Baltimore's probably going to attack this cover 3 with 4 verts, with verticals into the seams. That's probably going to be to Rashad Bateman in my eyes. He leads this offense with a 14.6 yard average depth of target. So I could see maybe 2 big plays from Rashad Bateman in this game.
All right, well, switching over to the Steelers offense, they have been absolutely humming since Russell Wilson stepped in.
They have. They're 10th in EPA per play since Russell Wilson took over, but they're 25th in success rate over that same stretch. So the reason they're doing so well is because they're hitting a completely unsustainable 53% of their passes with 20-plus air yards. I mean, George Pickens now has 2 more deep receptions than every other receiver in the NFL. So, I mean, we know Russell Wilson is a great deep ball thrower, but he's not going to be able to complete more than half of his deep balls the rest of the season. Now, they did get back center Zach Frazier, who ranks 4th in pass blocking efficiency. So I kind of like that for the Steelers offense going forward. But I do see some leaks in this offensive line on Sunday because backup right guard Mason McCormick is going to have to go against Nnamdi Madubuike, who had 3 sacks last week for the Ravens. And then Steelers right tackle Broderick Jones has allowed a league-high 7 sacks, and he's going to be lined up across from edge defender Kyle Van Noy, who ranks 15th in pressures.
All right, well, these leaks in the offensive line, does that mean they're going to really rely on the run game here?
I'm not as confident in the run game because the Ravens are 2nd in EPA per rush allowed. Now, what I do think they're going to do to counter these to counter the problems on the offensive line is throw a ton of screens and try and catch the Ravens in a blitz. Pittsburgh's running backs have the 8th highest target share in the NFL, and the Ravens defense is 31st in EPA per target allowed to opposing running backs.
Okay, well, are you worried at all about Kyle Hamilton missing this game?
I think he's going to be out. We'll see. He's 10th in yards per cover snap allowed in the slot, and, all pro safety. He's got that ankle, so I don't know that the Ravens are going to be pushing him. He's worth 0.6 points, according to our metrics. The Ravens have some pretty good depth in the secondary, so it's not going to be a massive blow, but it certainly will be seen on 1 or 2 plays in this game. So our model makes Baltimore a 4.6 point favorite with a predicted total of 49.5. So not enough difference there to have a bet on side or total.
All right, well, we've got one more thing, and that is your primetime prop, which you are 20-10 on. So what are you going to go with this Sunday?
All right, this Sunday, we're going to go with Derrick Henry over 4.5 receiving yards. So the Steelers are 5th in EPA per rush allowed. And I don't know that Derrick Henry is going to get going really in this game. The Steelers are a very physical defense. I feel like they can limit Derrick Henry, but that doesn't mean that the Ravens are just going to stop giving Derrick Henry the ball. I mean, he's forced a league high 59 missed tackles. They're just going to want to get him the ball in a different way. And the Steelers are allowing 0.27 EPA per target to opposing running backs. That's 28th in the league. So I think the Ravens are going to give Derrick Henry 2 targets on Sunday, and that should get us over the 4.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, the big fella's got to be able to get 4.5 yards. Come on. But I love that pick. And if you are looking for more content, we've got everything at drbobsports.com. We've got our subscriptions and our free write-ups. So as always, thanks for watching. We'll be back next Friday to preview week 12 of the NFL.